I'm going to be talking about water quantity and quality issues in Canterbury, but I am going to take a slightly different tack, not a different tack to one I took at the NZ Institute of Agricultural and Horticultural Science Conference last year that was held at Lincoln University. So for those of you, and I do notice one or two in the audience that were there, apologies. I have changed a few slides, amended a few messages, and we'll see what's different. So what I'm really going to be talking about is how we cook the cake, how we get things right in terms of making choices, getting the recipe right around water resource management, and they are issues of quantity and quality, and when we're talking quality, we're often talking about nitrogen and phosphorus issues. As pointed out by Peter, I've had over 4 years' experience on the Hurunui and Waiau Water Zone Committee, the longest running of the committees, and that's been a time period where I've learned a little bit, I think, about making the cake, about designing the cake, and hopefully in the long run getting the mix just about right. I'm going to talk though, first of all, in a few moments, about what the current cakes are like in Canterbury. So I'll report to you on what my perceptions are of each of the 10 zones in the region. I'm then going to spend some time about how you decide what the balance should be in amongst the recipe of the cake and what processes is used to decide on that sort of recipe. Then I'm going to spend a little bit of time about how we judge the quality of the cake or the quality of our water and the quantity of those from a variety of different perspectives. And then at the end of the day, I'm just going to spend a few moments thinking about what does the future hold in terms of water quality and water quantity, what will the cake look like and taste like in the future. So a lot of you will have seen a map like this before. This is a map that shows the Canterbury Regional Council region, and it shows all of the water zones in the region. I'm in the water zone not quite furthest north, that's Kaikoura. I'm in the Hurunui and Waiau zone, even though I live in Prebleton. And I live in Prebleton, but I have a lot of family ties that go into the Hurunui and Waiau zone. My parents' ashes are in the Waiau River. My grandfather died on the banks of the Waiau River, carting some doctors back from a day salmon fishing at the mouth. Carrying too many salmon, the dray wheel broke, he went to put it on and the dray collapsed on top of it. So my family ties go a long way back into Hurunui and Waiau, and I still fish there. I like to pretend I still kayak there. I haven't done so for a couple of years, getting a bit long in the tooth. But this zone is immensely important to me. It's immensely important to other people as well. The farmers, the other recreationists, the other businesses, the tangata whenua, there are lots of interest in those zones, just as there are in all of the other zones. What I'm now going to do though is put a table up which from my perspective evaluates how we are at the moment in terms of the state of the water resources in those zones. I think this is going to come as a shock to some people. And I'm sorry, it's a big table. So across the top we have all of the zones, ranging from Kaikoura in the north on the left, over across to Lower Waitaki, southern coastal Canterbury. And down the left or y-axis, what I've classified them into, our water resources, into 6 categories. Rivers which are mountain fed, they're mainly our braided rivers. Rivers which are foothill catchment rivers, then lowland streams, which the Avon is an example of. They're typically spring-fed streams. And then mountain lakes, lowland lakes, and then our groundwater resource. And what I've used is a traffic light scale to show you what I think is the current state of those resources. And I think it's pretty clear to see that if you run across the rows, and this shouldn't come as a surprise to people, but actually it's really important, that the mountain catchment rivers and the mountain lakes are generally in really good condition. And our groundwater, it's pretty good as well. Good quantity, generally good quality. But everything else, I'm sorry to say, it's a mess. It actually needs cleaning up. And this is a message I think we need to be really honest about and front up to. Because what this message also gives, if you agree with me of course, what this message also gives, it shows us an opportunity. But it's an opportunity we need to be really careful about. Because what it involves is mixing some of these cakes together. The only way we can probably get some things better here in some places I better use the word carefully, we need to take, I was going to say rob, but we need to borrow some water from the mountain-fed rivers, put that water into our lowland streams and our aquifers so that the solution is by dilution. We clean up by taking water out of those beautiful big rivers, putting it into other catchments, and that's the process we use to help clean up some of the mess. In many regards then, Canterbury is extremely lucky. I often talk about Te Waihora Lake Ellesmere as the lucky lake, and it is in many regards. It's really lucky it blows there all the time to keep the water mixed up and oxygenated, which keeps the lake alive. Otherwise we would be in really big trouble. I think in Canterbury too, we are really lucky to have a range of large mountain-fed braided rivers that are geographically quite nicely spread across the region. Virtually every zone has at least one of those rivers either flowing alongside it, or in the case of Hurunui and Waiau, a couple flowing right through the zone. It's those rivers that help provide us with the opportunity to make the Canterbury Water Management Strategy work. Without those rivers, you think we're in trouble now with lowland streams and foothill streams, we would be in a far worse position. That also means we need to be really careful about how we use and value those large braided rivers, and we should not view the water that goes to sea as wasted. Believe me, it is not wasted. It performs an ecosystem service. So that's my evaluation of where we are at the moment. And yes, I may have a red in the wrong place or an orange not quite right, and the greens mightn't be the right shade, all of those sorts of things, but that's my picture. What does that mean in the bottom right corner where I have a look at overall Canterbury's performance? It is really mixed. It is really mixed, and we need to do better, and I think we can. So one of the issues that we face is the fact that my idea of a nice cake might not be the same as every other person's here. In the social sciences, we refer to social construction theory, and we have lots of students at Lincoln and in other universities working around different ways that people construct their view of the environment. I do a little bit of whitewater kayaking. I'm a grade 2 kayaker. I'm pretty hopeless. Have verged on the grade 3, nearly drowned, gone back to grade 2 and got near retirement. But a grade 5 kayaker, he or she will have a totally different view of what a good river system is, as will a dairy farmer, as will a fly fisher. These different constructions mean it's often difficult to get an overall coherent understanding of what makes a really nice looking cake, or in the case of rivers, what makes a good river and what makes a river tick. So we need to be really clear, and I think we have in Hurunui and Waiau and probably in most of the other zones, we need to be really clear on what these different social constructions are and overall what that then means the cake should look like or the rivers should look like going forward to 2040, which is the outer sort of time frame of the Canterbury Water Management Strategy. I think we are clear on that. Once you're clear on those targets, you can start thinking about the means for the ends. So in the case of Hurunui and Waiau, we defined the bird habitat requirements. We defined what the trout anglers wanted, because in the Canterbury Water Management Strategy, the first order priorities are environmental. So we did those first, and once we had defined what those environmental cakes should look like, we then looked to see how we could meet the other components of the quadruple bottom line. Cultural, well actually that was right up there as well, I better be careful. Cultural, economic and social. We need to put all of those together to make the cake grow and Canterbury's pie grow as well. And once we've defined all of those, then through plans we're able to make rules and have voluntary approaches which will hope to leading us towards meeting those ends. Another lesson from this sort of approach is that diversity of membership of these sort of groups means we get that diversity of understanding and different social constructions which allow us to make sure that we get that community-held view of what the overall cake should look like. If we had stuck the Canterbury Water Management Strategy solely in the farmer's hands, or solely in the trout fishers' or kayakers' hands, we would not have designed the cake in the way we have now, and I don't think we would be heading in the direction that most of us involved in the process are committed to. But there is a little risk, and I've seen it recently. You can have too many cooks in the room, committees that are far too big, and it becomes very unwieldy and difficult to make progress. So there's some ideal sized groups, there's some ideal ideas around diversity, but we need to be working together, and that's what we've been trying to do. So we know what we want the rivers to look like. We're pretty clear on that. We know how we want agriculture to thrive. We know what the tangata whenua needs are, and we know what social progress wants to look like. But there is this $1 billion, and it really is a $1 billion cloud, I think, hanging around us. And it's about some of the key ingredients in the cake, particularly around nitrogen and to a lesser extent phosphorus. Basically, we've got too much nitrogen in some of the cakes. And we've got to do something about that nitrogen, and it's not easy to do. And if we don't do it, sooner rather than later, the cake is not going to be the cake we want. So there are some real issues around that, and in Hurunui and Waiau, as in other zones, we're trying to face up to those issues. And one of those issues is about grandparenting. I've got some great cake recipes from my grandmother, got some great ones from my mother as well. My mother and grandmother passed those on to me. I own them. Grandparenting. It's like the irrigated farmer who might be emitting 45 kilograms of nitrogen per hectare per year. If we grandparent that right and don't require him or her to get those emissions way down, then the river might suffer, and also other farmers cannot benefit from that gain. So grandparenting is a big issue. It's an equity issue. And there's a whole lot of equity issues in this space that we have to work through. And it's really difficult. Hurunui and Waiau, it is really difficult. South Canterbury coastal streams, they were able to make some progress. They had some free water, I think, from the Waitaki and some existing headroom. They were able to make progress. But this is a really hard thing to do. So how do we share those ingredients around so that we just have the right level of nitrogen, the right level of phosphorus, and we don't have too many of those horrible fecal coliforms in our cake, because that would make for a very awful cake to taste? It's not easy to do. So what we need to do is somehow manage our way through grandparenting. We have to get the existing irrigated farmers in particular, and they are coming to the party. It's good because there's going to be a cake at the party. They are coming to the party, and they're going to need to reduce their nitrogen emissions. And a lot of them are going to need to reduce them quite significantly. But you can't just do it like that. You can't say, hey, Farmer X, switch off your nitrogen. Things don't work that way. We have transition periods, transition times, and that's why the Canterbury Water Management Strategy has a time frame that goes out to 2040. Rome, or the Rakaia River, or a nice lake, wasn't built in a day. Good things take time, and we have to give it some time. But equally, we don't want to see the cake being spoilt in the meantime. So, the bottom point, we all have to understand that we have to farm within limits if we want the cake we all agreed we wanted. So the first thing the zone committees pretty much did, certainly Hurunui and Waiau, was define what we wanted in the zone. The second thing we did was design how we would get there. And the third thing is dealing with a whole lot of these equity issues that are involved in doing that and actually putting in place strategies to make sure it happens. It's not easily done. So can we have the perfect cake with the perfect mix of ingredients and eat it too? In other words, have a balanced diet. Well, my short answer is no, we can't. You know, he's not here. Don't think, doesn't matter. I've got a colleague who works for NIWA, and he's the eternal optimist. Absolutely optimistic about everything. I too am a glass 3/4 full person. I like to think that we can get there with the Canterbury Water Management Strategy? So my short answer was no. My longer answer is yes. But in getting to yes, no one will be perfectly satisfied. I've been up in Tauranga at a Resource Council research meeting for the last couple of days, and one of the things we discussed was around the quadruple bottom and top lines and about winners and losers and balance. And my view has matured over the years to the point where I think that as environmentalists, and I look at everyone in this room and you're all environmentalists, as environmentalists, I actually think throughout the Canterbury Water Management Strategy we're all going to lose. Hey? How can you be an optimist and think we're all going to lose? Because if you go back to that table I put up for a start, we're already in a very parlous state in many parts of our water resource. And getting back doesn't mean to say we've won, we've actually just recovered a bit. That's all we might be able to do. We're never going to get back to a nirvana or to a pristine environment. But hey, should we? You know, life has to go on. We all have to live and have incomes and all of those sorts of things. But also, almost by definition, I don't think the environment compared to a benchmark of 100 years ago will ever get back to where it was. But I am not crying over that, because I think the cakes that we have designed we can get to, and it will be an improvement in some cases over the environment we have today, but not the environment we might have had 50 or 100 years ago. I think there will have been a net social welfare gain. That's what economists call it. So we will have grown the overall pie or the cake. Well, that's actually a really good thing as well. The economy will be benefiting. Ngāi Tahu will be benefiting. Employment levels will have gone up and hopefully incomes as well. And by at least recovering aspects of the environment, we'll actually have something to do with that excess dollar or two that we have in our pocket. So that's really good. As long as we keep treasuring those rivers and high country lakes that I showed you are the real trick to making all of this work. We must maintain them the way they are, and we can feed off them carefully to help get those other reds and oranges maybe back a little bit and improved a little bit. So overall, and this is my final remark, overall as a community we will be in a far better position as a result of the Canterbury Water Management Strategy. There was a Freudian slip. We will be in a far better position having seen through with the Canterbury Water Management Strategy than we would have been with the litigious approaches that we were running and continued to run until the Water Management Strategy was put in place. Thank you very much, Peter. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.